Hey everyone, tonight we are going to embark on a harrowing 6-day journey of survival against nature's fiercest elements. Picture biting wind that steals your breath, ice that clings to every surface, and the ever-present threat of exhaustion. This is not a tale of Hollywood heroics or neat rescue. It's a raw, unfiltered chronicle of human resilience when hope seems buried beneath layers of snow. We'll feel the sting of cold, the ache of hunger, and the flicker of doubt as frostbite and fear close in. Yet through grit and camaraderie, these survivors discover inner strengths they never knew they possessed. So before we get started, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel so I can keep making better videos. Now enjoy a cup of hot tea and let's embark on this journey together tonight. Dawn broke in a whisper, a pale glow stretching across an endless field of pristine white. The 6 survivors emerged from their collapsed lean-to one by one, each silhouette etched against the frozen horizon. Breath billowed from their mouths like ghostly banners, and every footfall crunched under layers of brittle snow. Emma knelt by her boots, tracing a finger along the stiff leather now glazed with ice crystals that threatened to grip her skin. She glanced at Marcus, who stood rigidly scanning the skyline for landmarks, though every dune of snow looked identical. Beyond them, the once distant peaks of an unnamed mountain range glowed silver in the morning light, inscrutable and unwelcoming. Their leader, Raj, unclipped a small mirror from his pack and angled it toward the sun. A sudden flare of light danced across his face, momentarily lifting his spirits before reality settled back in. He wiped condensation from his goggles and addressed the group voice, low and steady despite the cold. "We have 6 days until the rescue window closes," he reminded them. "Our priority is shelter, water, and food, and then staying alive long enough to signal help." Cold seeped through every layer of clothing. Their insulated jackets felt like thin paper against the gale that rattled the skeletal remains of their camp. The frozen ground offered no handholds, and the day's first task would be to find a source of liquid water. Heat meant life, but life demanded warmth they didn't yet possess. Emma tugged at a length of nylon cord, fashioning a crude snare to catch small rodents beneath an overhanging rock. In the distance, 2 vultures circled, riding thermal currents long since extinguished by winter's grasp. High above, a lone raven croaked its black form, a stark contrast to the blinding white landscape. It perched on a jagged ridge, head tilted as if judging their plight. For a moment, all 6 shared the bird's vantage, seeing the world from an unforgiving perspective. No colors beyond gray and white, no sounds except the howl of wind and the creak of frost-bound gear. Their breaths synchronized as they set to work. Ben, the group's engineer, wielded a small shovel to carve a trench in the snow that would serve as a makeshift funnel. He dropped in a bit of black cloth, Raj's last thermal liner, to absorb sunlight and induce melting. Nearby, Sophia pried loose a patch of wind-blown rock to examine for lichen and possibly edible moss. She scraped gently, mindful of frostbite creeping across her fingertips. Time moved slowly in the frozen void. Each minute felt like an hour, every task a mountain unto itself. Marcus coaxed a spark from his magnesium fire starter, but the wind snatched it away, extinguishing hope as quickly as the flame ignited. They huddled in a tight circle, legs curled, heads bowed, conserving heat. Raj produced a single strip of emergency ration, half of a chocolate bar, and tore it into sixths. It dissolved on their tongues with the flavor of desperation and necessity. As the sun climbed, the sky shifted from milky gray to a burning white glare. Shadows vanished, erasing depth perception and making the horizon an impossible mirage. Emma glanced at the hastily carved funnel. A thin trickle of water had begun to pool in the base. It was barely enough to wet their parched lips, yet they collected every drop, holding it in cupped hands as if it were liquid gold. Sophia dipped her scarf and wrung it into a dented metal cup, the cloth releasing droplets that slid like teardrops over her mittens. They drank in silence, each lost in private dread and determination. The avalanche of challenges had only just begun, and already the cold showed no mercy. Yet within that silence, a quiet trust formed a tacit agreement that each would shoulder the burden and carry the others. Emma looked at Raj, whose frostbitten cheek bore the faintest tremor, and offered a stiff nod. He returned it with a clenched jaw and squared shoulders. Above all, the landscape remained indifferent. Ice crystals danced on the wind, settling on eyelashes, and lips forging an unbreakable bond between the survivors and the frozen world. But inside each chest beat a relentless heart, refusing to let despair settle like frostbite in their souls. Their journey had begun 6 days of relentless struggle, yet at this frigid awakening, something raw and unshakable took form: the unyielding will to live. The wind arrived without warning, a furious white wall that slammed into the survivors' flimsy shelter like a battering ram. One moment, the lean-to a haphazard frame of broken branches, tarps salvaged from their packs, and snow-packed walls stood tense against the gale. The next, the entire structure groaned and creaked, timbers snapping as though splintered by an invisible hand. Raj lunged forward to brace the main support, his gloved hands slipping on ice-crusted wood. A deafening crack split the air, and the roof collapsed in a fractal of flying shards and whipping canvas. Emma dove to shield Marcus, who tumbled backward as the wall of their lean-to buckled beneath them. Snow cascaded into the pit where they'd sought refuge, burying their supplies: the scant rations of protein bars, a half-empty canteen, the small stove coveted for its ability to melt snow. Sophia scrambled to her feet, adrenaline igniting her limbs as she wrenched at the canvas. The gale tore it from her grasp and sent it arching skyward like a wounded albatross before it disappeared into the storm. For a heartbeat, time froze. The survivors lay sprawled in the debris-twisted branches, frozen tarps, and fistfuls of abrasive snow clutched in mittened hands. Even the wind paused, perhaps in pity, before resuming its assault. Raj bellowed against the roar retrieve, the emergency bivvies. His voice was swallowed by the blizzard, but his urgency cut through their shock. Ben and Sophia crawled toward the scattered gear, their breath ragged and rapid. Emma maintained a human shield over Marcus, whose side ached from the collapse. Without solid shelter, the polar wind seeped through every layer of their clothing, intent on freezing blood in their veins. Raj shouted again, stabbing at the ground with his trekking pole. Over there, rock outcrop. Through the swirling white, a dark shape emerged, the facade of an outcropping jutting sharply from the snowfield. It offered scant protection, but it was something. The team forced themselves upright, staggering like marionettes in a gale, and stumbled toward the promise of solid rock. Each step was agony. Wind-driven snow sliced at exposed skin, finding gaps at collars and glove seams. Emma's cheek stung, the cold burning like acid. Still, they crawled forward, pressing together against the blast. Marcus, though bruised, helped Sophia hoist the small pack containing their emergency blankets, his borrowed warmth sustaining her. Ben retrieved the stove and fuel where it lay half buried. Its metal body was glazed white, but it remained intact. At the rock face, they formed a human barricade. Raj lashed tarps between two jagged boulders, creating a narrow vestibule just large enough to huddle inside. Sophia wedged broken branches at the base, and Ben arranged chunks of ice-packed snow against the edges, hoping to seal wind gaps. Inside, the survivors found a momentary lull, cocooned by stone that absorbed the worst of the gusts. Their throats ached from inhaling frozen air. Their hearts pounded as though they'd sprinted a marathon. Raj retrieved his small stove and lit it within the vestibule, careful to angle the flame away from the canvas. A thin plume of smoke coiled upward, carrying with it the smell of warm metal and fuel, a fragile scent of hope. He placed a snowball on the stove's tiny grill, and the water that hissed from it felt like salvation. The survivors passed around the metal cup. Each sip was scalding, burning away more of the chill that had settled in their bones. In that flickering glow, they assessed the damage. The lean-to was gone, shattered beyond repair. The emergency bivvies, their last safeguard against hypothermia, were compressed within ugly, acrid-smelling foil. Rations were halved. Each person had only a few morsels of freeze-dried fruit and a sliver of jerky. Their water supply was non-existent. The stove fuel would be spent within hours if they melted enough snow for drinking. The rock outcrop was a refuge, yes, but it offered no protection from the longer night ahead. Sophia's voice trembled as she spoke for the first time since the collapse. We're 90 hours from dawn. If the storm lasts that long, her words trailed off, but the implication was clear: they might not endure. Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder. Under the battered remains of his parka, hood sweat mingled with frost. "We endure," he said, 1 hour at a time. His gaze swept the group. Emma's jaw was set. Ben's eyes were pinched with exhaustion. Raj's fists were clamped around his trekking poles, knuckles whitening. A low rumble roiled through the ice above them. It wasn't thunder. Mountains make no noise. Instead, it was the groan of shifting snow, a reminder that the world around them was alive with peril. The gale picked up, rattling at their fragile sanctuary. Raj leaned against the rock, pressing his body behind a boulder that acted as a shield. He studied the horizon, although all he saw was a wall of white. "Listen," he whispered, though the roar should have drowned him out. "We need to move deeper into that outcrop. There's a cavity I saw earlier, could be a small cave." Even with his words, it felt like madness, venturing beyond any semblance of shelter into unknown ice corridors. But to stay meant certain freezing. To leave meant risk of being swallowed by the storm. They prepared with grim efficiency. Ben stuffed spare clothing into bivy sacks and tied them to a broken branch to serve as both anchor and marker. Emma organized ration portions, securing them in her inner pouch. Marcus and Sophia tested the stove's remaining fuel, calculating the minimum flame needed to melt a liter of water, just enough to wet their throats, but not squander fuel on warmth. One by one, they stepped from the vestibule into the gale hands clutched to their faces, eyes narrowed. The wind flayed at them, but they pressed on, moving in single file toward the mouth of the rock formation. Emma led, feeling each rock lip for stability beneath the snow. The cavern yawned before them, a low arch of stone, dark and forbidding. Inside, the temperature rose by a few degrees, the wind reduced to a whisper. They sank to the floor, backs against the cold wall, forming a ring. Raj lit the small stove again, and its flame danced shadows on the chamber's back wall. No fresh lean-to could match the protection offered by solid rock. Here they could ration fuel for melting water, while the cavern's mass retained throttled heat. But the cave's ceiling dripped ice, tiny droplets that threatened to fall unexpectedly, striking helmets or packs. In the flickering stove light, each face told its own story. Exhaustion etched deep lines. Frostbite reddened patches on fingers, ears, noses. Yet amidst the weariness, there glowed a spark of defiance. They had faced collapse, a sudden unraveling of hope, and still they moved forward. The lean-to was gone, a symbol of hubris in the face of nature's might. But the survivors endured because they chose to improvise, to seek refuge in the bones of the mountain itself. The storm raged beyond the cave's mouth, an unceasing howl that would last hours, perhaps the remainder of the day. Within the stone womb, they dared to rest, shoulders touching shared body heat, a small rebellion against the cold. Sophia closed her eyes, recalling the taste of warm tea at home. Marcus focused on the promise of sunrise, however faint. Raj kept watch, scanning the darkness for any shift in wind or snow that might guard or betray them. Tomorrow they would erect a proper snow shelter, a quingy inside this cavern, carving walls from compacted drift and reinforcing them with ice-lashed boughs. Tonight they simply existed, huddled in a circle of humanity against the indifferent rock. Outside, the storm was absolute. Inside, their fragile peace held against the roaring void. A thin ribbon of sunlight breached the swirling gray ceiling, casting a momentary glow across the cavern floor. Raj's stove flickered as he angled its small opening toward the beam, coaxing more heat from the fading fuel. "We might get 10 minutes, he whispered, voice low. Outside, the storm's roar retreated to a faint hiss. Sophia pressed her gloved palm against the cave wall, eyes closed, savoring the reprieve as the ice around her fingertips softened. Even Marcus dared to lift his hood, letting his cheeks taste the warmth. They crawled toward the cave entrance, like cautious observers approaching a fragile miracle. The storm had abated just enough that the world beyond their stone refuge looked transformed. The snowfield glistened, every flake catching the light and refracting it in 1,000 miniature rainbows. It was beautiful and deadly. Emma knelt at the threshold, tracing cracks that spiderwebbed across the snowpack. "This melt will be deceptive," she warned, voice echoing against granite. "The surface looks solid, but everything beneath might be unstable." Ben produced a length of rope and secured one end around his waist. He tucked himself low, testing each step beyond the cave. The snow groaned under his weight, a hollow sound that sent an involuntary shiver through the group. Carefully, he moved forward, probe in hand, tapping the surface for hidden voids. At first, each strike felt firm, but as he advanced, the probe broke through a thin crust into a yawning gap, an unseen crevasse, its edges concealed by thin layers of fresh powder. Ben froze, breath caught in his throat. Raj reached out, securing the rope around his wrist. "Stay calm," he murmured. Slowly, Ben backstepped, pulling himself free with Raj's assistance. Sophia exhaled relieved, but the encounter cut the fragile peace of thaw. The sunlight that promised warmth now threatened sudden treachery. They faced a paradox. They needed to melt more snow for water and to soften the ground for shelter construction, but each thaw risked collapse. "Let's mark the dangerous spots," Marcus suggested, fishing colorful strips of tape from his pack. He tied one to the rock pillar at the cave entrance, creating a makeshift warning flag. Emma added another to the crease where the probe went through. Together they mapped a narrow path, a winding corridor that skirted the worst hazards. As they worked, the sun climbed higher, intensifying the glow and accelerating the melt. Raj consulted his watch. "We have 8 hours of daylight left," he calculated. "Use it wisely." He cracked open a ration packet, distributing small squares of dried fish leather and a few grains of oatmeal. The group ate in silence, each mouthful a reminder of how little they possessed. Even the smallest boost of calories felt like a feast. With renewed senses, Sophia and Ben set to carving a quingy inside the darkest recesses of the cave. Using their shovels, they piled snow into a mound against the inner wall, compacting it with their feet. Emma draped spare tarps over the forming dome, anchoring them with rocks to serve as a moisture barrier. Marcus worked on channeling meltwater from the cave's drip line into a shallow trench, fashioning a miniature gutter system so that droplets wouldn't fall directly into their camp. Each innovation was born of necessity and desperation. As they worked, the sun's angle shifted and the light retreated, swallowed by clouds gathering at the lip of the cave. The wind, now tempered, whispered through the rock fissures. For a moment, the world outside sounded benign, but Emma recalled the earlier crevasse. One misstep, and the ground would swallow them whole. She moved cautiously, probing every step with her ice axe. By midday, the quingy stood hollowed out, a low dome, roomy enough for the 6 of them to sit upright, lined with tarps, and insulated with compacted snow blocks. Marcus carefully tested the ceiling's thickness. A single hammer tap echoed like a distant drum, but the structure held firm. They stacked their sleeping pads on the floor, forming an inner circle where body heat could accumulate. Then came the real test water. Raj lit the stove one final time, the flame dancing like a living thing in the dim interior. He placed a chunk of snow on the small grill plate. Steam curled upward, carrying the aroma of burnt fuel and promise. Sophia held the metal cup beneath the melting edge, counting each drop that fell. 10, 20, 30. With measured care, she set the cup aside, and Emma passed around a tiny vial of electrolyte tablets, Raj's last reserve, to stave off dehydration. As they drank, the melted snow's warmth coaxed color back into their faces. Heat moved through them like gentle waves, thawing more than just their muscles. For a span of moments, they forgot the storm. They remembered laughter from home, the taste of soup, the smell of pine forests. Marcus traced his fingertip around the rim of the cup as if outlining an invisible map. "This water," he said softly, "is worth more than all the gold in the world." But the sun's mercy was fickle. Outside, a fresh veil of storm clouds darkened the sky, and the wind's cadence grew impatient. Raj peered from the Quingy's doorway, watching the first flakes drift down like lost spirits. "We need to finish inside work," he ordered, voice steady. "We carve benches and shelves for supplies. Then we seal off the entrance, leave a small vent, but nothing more." Energy drained swiftly from their limbs, yet each survivor found a final reserve. Under Emma's direction, they carved slender benches along the walls, positioning gear within arm's reach. Ben anchored a makeshift shelf for the stove and fuel. Sophia tucked extra rations in pockets carved into the snow. Marcus fashioned a door of compacted snow blocks held in place by ice-laced branches. Raj marked the vent, a narrow slit above their heads 6 inches wide, to allow fresh air and release moisture without admitting wind. As they worked, the cave's interior heated, imperceptibly tempered by the melting snow that insulated the walls. Outside, the first real snowfall began, drift after drift, piling atop the Quingy's roof. Emma paused, listening to the soft thump of flakes settling. A hush fell, broken only by their labored breathing and the creak of compacted snow shifting into place. The Quingy groaned ominously as new weight gathered overhead, but it held firm proof that their labor had paid off. When the final block was set, Raj extinguished the stove to conserve fuel. In the dim half-light, they gathered in a circle, sharing their dwindling supplies. Each morsel felt sacred: a bite of dried apple, a spoonful of powdered milk. They spoke little, but understanding flowed between them. They had crafted a sanctuary within the stone womb, transforming peril into protection, deception into refuge. Emma closed her eyes, imagining the cave as a giant, womb-like embrace, shielding them from nature's cruelty. Marcus leaned back against the smooth snow wall, listening to the wind's muted roar through the vent. Sophia thumbed the edge of the Quingy's lip, where fresh snow piled like a soft duvet. Ben and Raj shared a glance. Both knew that tomorrow would bring fresh trials, but tonight they had carved safety from thaw and deception. Outside, under clouded skies, a treacherous landscape lay blanketed in white. But inside the survivors, 6 bodies, 6 hearts lay in a fragile peace, warmed by melted water, shared ingenuity, and the unspoken vow to endure until dawn's full light. A low, undulating moan rose outside the Quingy's narrow vent, unlike any wind they had heard, deeper, keener, carrying grains of ice that rasped against the snow blocks. Raj tightened the straps of his goggles and peered through the slit. The world beyond had vanished into a wall of white. The swirling snow came in sheets so thick it felt as if the sky itself had fractured and poured down upon them. He pressed his forehead against the tunnel of light, noting the distortion. What had been solid rock and powdery dunes now moved like living waves. Inside, the survivors clung to their benches. As the Quingy trembled, Emma's heart thudded against her ribs. Each gust made the snow ceiling fracture with a distant crack, as if the cavern might implode at any moment. Sophia pressed a mitten to her mouth, stifling a gasp both at the storm's ferocity and at the realization that their sanctuary could become their tomb. Ben crouched by the stove shelf, eyeing the last canister of fuel. If it ran out now, the Quingy would chill into an ice coffin. Marcus rose to reinforce the snow blocks along the entrance. He tapped each with the flat of his ice axe. Some rang hollow, others dull. The noise carried like a signal through the blizzard's din, and Emma winced, fearing the vibrations might trigger a collapse. "Be gentle," she warned, voice trembling. Marcus paused, inhaling, as though to steel himself, and resumed his careful prodding, pushing packed snow into gaps until the blocks locked tighter. Raj moved to the center, raising his voice above the din. "Check your vents," he called, though the words nearly dissolved in the storm's roar. Sophia felt along the ceiling for the ventilation slit, finding it by touch alone. With her free hand, she pressed a thin icicle, formed by inward condensation, against the wall, then snapped it off to clear the opening. Fresh air hissed in, sending a breeze straight into her face. She shivered and peered upward, watching the icicle's twin form and drip. The storm's howl pierced the Quingy like a spectral choir. Each note threatened to unmake their fragile refuge. Emma's mind raced back to the collapse of the lean-to, that sudden disintegration, and to the cavern rescue that followed. If this collapsed, there would be nowhere left to hide. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to breathe steadily, to think clearly. Ben gathered discarded tarp fragments and jettisoned them outside in a final attempt to anchor them as windbreakers. He climbed to the top of the Quingy, pressing the tarps over its dome and burying edges with new snow. His crampons clanked, and each step felt like walking a tightrope. Emma watched from below breath, suspended until she saw him return, teeth gritted and wide-eyed but unhurt. Below, Sophia and Marcus turned their attention to the stove. The flame flickered precariously in the crosswinds leaping toward the Quingy's interior walls. Sophia caught the burner's reflection in her goggles and lunged to steady it, chest almost brushing the flame. "Don't let it snuff," she hissed. Ben handed her a length of insulated tubing, jury-rigged as an airflow extension, so that the burner drew oxygen from deeper in the Quingy rather than from the entrance area. They exchanged a quick nod, a rare moment of camaraderie amid chaos. That nod was all Raj needed. He unwrapped the final ration pack, spilling 6 tiny flakes of dried seaweed onto his mitten. 1 leaf each, he commanded. The morsels vanished on their tongues, a briny whisper in a storm of white noise. There was no flavor beyond salt, but it revived their chatter. Sophia discussed ration strategies. Marcus calculated the remaining hours until midnight, and Emma rechecked the Quingy's interior temperature with a small mercury thermometer. It read 12 degrees mild compared to the 30 degrees outside, but still hellish for frozen bodies. At that temperature, hypothermia became stealthy. Raj tapped his watch again. We're at hour 24, one day down 5 to go. He let the words hang. They'd passed through sleeping cycles inside the Quingy, but no one had truly rested. Sleep risked numbness. Staying awake risked exhaustion. The wind roared, but inside their minds roared louder. A sudden shudder rippled through the snow blocks. Emma's gut clenched. The entrance wall shifted, and a fine line of new cracks spidered across its surface. She lunged to the side as a spray of glittering ice dust drifted off the blocks. Raj sprang forward, pressing his shoulder into the wall, bracing it with all his weight. Ben and Marcus followed, stacking ice-choked branches between the blocks and compacted snow reinforcing the structure from within. Sophia held a flashlight under her chin, casting eerie shadows as they worked blind against the creeping collapse. Silence fell in that moment. No storm, no voice, no breath, just the creak of straining ice. Then the front wall lurched outward but held. Raj exhaled in relief. That's the last point of failure, he panted. We need to distribute weight tomorrow, dig out snow around the base, relieve pressure. Each survivor nodded, though their limbs trembled. Sophia leaned back, lowering the flashlight. In the half-light, she watched the compressed layers of snow glitter like gemstones, layers upon layers, each formed by 100 storms before this one. She realized they stood within a living history of wind, cold, and relentless change. The Quingy was more than shelter. It was a testament to human will layered into nature's own architecture. Minutes stretched until the storm's roar softened to an insistent whisper. Raj poked his head toward the entrance. Pale gray light filtered in no sun, but a tenuous dimness that spoke of shifting weather. He pulled Sophia aside. We've bought time, but not safety, he murmured. Once it eases, we carve a secondary exit to avoid collapse on a single wall. Emma used the lull to whisper reassurances. We're okay, she said, voice gentle. This Quingy is our shield. We'll reinforce it. Each word felt like a promise she had to keep, even as doubt scraped at her resolve. For now they clustered silently around the stove, catching shared glances that said more than any sentence. The storm remained outside, fierce and indifferent. Inside, they clung to warmth, ingenuity, and one another. The whiteout had tested them, stripped them of certainties, but it had also confirmed one truth: they were alive and still fighting. The snow's roar might rage on, but the Quingy held a fragile fortress of willpower and snow. Morning light seeped through the vent slit like a promise. Inside the Quingy, the survivors stirred with stiff limbs and hollow stomachs. Emma stretched her shoulders, popping with relief, but the emptiness in her belly reminded her there had been no breakfast. The ration packs lay half buried in snow pockets along the bench, freeze-dried meals solidified into icy bricks. They looked at each other, acknowledging the unspoken truth. Hunger was as dangerous as cold. Raj retrieved the stove and positioned it on its makeshift shelf. We need hot food, he said quietly, voice husky, even if it's just melted snow with rehydrated oats. He scooped a handful of frozen flakes into the tiny pot. Sophia gathered snow from the floor's edges, scraping away hardened drifts with her hands' mittens shredded by ice. She filled the pot to the brim, mindful of fuel conservation. Ben watched the flames sputter to life, nodding once before turning to Marcus. "We rationed today," Marcus announced, cutting 2 strips of jerky into 6 equal slivers with his multi-tool. The pieces were no larger than gumdrops, but they would deliver protein and morale. Emma distributed them silently, each person receiving their share. She held hers against her chest, letting body heat soften it before taking tiny bites. The taste was leathery and briny, but it reminded her of strength. The porridge hissed as the snow melted. Steam curled upward, fogging goggles and curling into the corners of the cavern. A faint aroma of oats, grainy and bland, wafted through the quingy. Raj ladled spoonfuls into metal cups, handing each survivor a warm portion. They ate with closed eyes, savoring warmth that spread through their chests. For a moment, the world beyond melted away. They were 6 people united by hunger, each bite a triumph. As they ate, Emma recounted their inventory: 2 remaining strips of jerky, 1 oatmeal packet, 3 electrolyte tablets, and half a chocolate bar stashed in Sophia's pocket. Their water supply rested on the stove's mercy and the slow drip of the ceiling's icicles. The storm had eased to a whisper, but temperatures remained brutal. Hypothermia was an ever-present threat, and without calories, their bodies would be the first to surrender. Sophia tapped her temple. "We need to think beyond these rations. The snowpack might hide roots, or plants lichen moss, maybe willow buds along those crevasse edges." She gestured toward the flagged path marked earlier. "We could risk a quick foray grab, what we can then return before collapse." Raj rubbed his chin. "Worth considering, but the risk is falling into hidden ice or collapsing new snow. We need more warm clothing before we venture out." His gaze shifted to the only spare layers: a windbreaker, a thin fleece, and the emergency bivvies crinkly sheets that offered minimal insulation, but more than nothing. Marcus volunteered immediately. He donned the windbreaker over his parka, then clambered to the quingy's rim, where Ben handed him a bivvy. Outside, the air stabbed at his exposed face, and he squinted against the glare. With the bivvy wrapped around his legs, he looked like a silver specter creeping across the snow. Raj adjusted a rope harness around Marcus's waist, attaching a safety line to the rock outcrop anchor. Below inside the quingy, Emma and Sophia prepared small pouches of snow and a half-empty cup of electrolyte solution. "Hydration first," Emma said. "Better to conserve energy melting snow outside with warmer bodies." They handed 1 pouch and half cup to Marcus. Stepping through the entry slit, Marcus became a solitary figure in a barren white wasteland. He followed the flagged tape path, each step deliberate. His crampons bit into the crust, but he moved cautiously, ice axe, tapping ahead with rhythmic precision. He reached the first marker, the yawning crevasse, shimmering edges outlined by thin snow. He edged close gingerly, probing around its rim for any edible growth. After a tense minute, he found a clump of dark green lichen clinging to a rock. It looked brittle, but possibly edible after boiling. He scraped with his ice axe, gathering enough for a single handful, then moved to the next marker, a drifted pocket beneath an overhang. There, faint moss grew soft and fibrous, a handful more. His body temperature rose, despite the cold exertion bringing warmth. He gathered quickly now, placing the lichen and moss into the small pouches. On the return path, he spotted a tuft of dry grass peeking from the snow, a likely sign of willow or sedge roots beneath. He crouched, plunged his gloved hands into powdery snow, and thumbed small roots that snapped like twigs. He pocketed as many as he could, then retraced his steps to the quingy. Inside, cold rushed in as the entrance opened, but the survivors greeted him with relief. He deposited his foraged finds on the bench, handfuls of lichen moss and roots. Sophia inspected each, her face unreadable. If we clean and boil these, they'll give us fiber and minimal calories, she said. She crushed some between gloved fingers. Dry dust spiraled upward. Raj measured boiling water, then dropped in the lichen, first stirring with an icicle. The moss and roots followed, softening in the hot liquid. The aroma was earthy, damp wood and forest floors. The group stirred, each watching as the sustenance transformed. Raj ladled small spoonfuls into their cups. They tasted gritty bits of mineral and vegetation, far from palatable, but a lifeline. Emma realized that survival meant embracing discomfort. They would learn to taste frost and hunger with equal respect. With the new provisions, they adjusted their ration plan. Each would receive 1 dried rations slice and 2 tablespoons of the vegetal broth 3 times over the next 24 hours. The electrolyte tablets and chocolate bar would be saved for emergencies or to boost morale. Sophia documented the plan on a scrap of paper, folding it and tucking it into her pocket. As the makeshift meal warmed their insides, conversation flickered. They traded memories of meals enjoyed back home, a bowl of piping ramen, a spoonful of cinnamon oatmeal, a slice of birthday cake. Each memory was vivid aromas, flavors, textures. They spoke not in envy, but in gratitude for the contrast, the richness of life they hoped to reclaim. After the meal, the group set about conserving energy. Ben reinforced the quingy's benches, piling extra snow blocks at pressure points. Emma tended to her boots, unclogging ice from seams to prevent frostbite. Marcus tucked the safety line back into the storage pocket, while Sophia coated her mittens with a thin layer of dried animal fat from the jerky, creating a rudimentary wind barrier. Raj led a brief meditation, eyes closed, bodies still focusing on breath and the beating heart as an affirmation of life. Silence settled the storm outside, subdued to a distant hum. They sat shoulder to shoulder, sharing warmth and determination. The tastes of icy porridge, leathery jerky, and bitter forest broth mingled in their mouths, a reminder that they were alive and resourceful. When the meditation ended, Raj checked his watch. 5 days remain, he announced calmly. We'll rest now and start forging our path to the summit tomorrow, but tonight conserve strength. He extinguished the stove and darkness crept in. In the dim glow of headlamps, each survivor prepared for the long freeze. They nestled into their benches, bivvies wrapped tightly. Outside, the wind settled into a steady hush. Inside, the taste of cold hunger and hope lingered binding them for the trials yet to come. The signal came at twilight, a lone flare arching across the bruised sky before dying in a wisp of smoke. Sophia spotted it first. Through the Quingy's vent slid a pale ember against gathering shadows. "Flare," she whispered, voice cracking with wonder. "Someone's out there." Raj's heart pounded. A rescue attempt or a distress call from another lost party. He peered through the slit, scanning the featureless horizon. The snowfield lay flat and endless, but a faint glow lingered at the flare's apex before fading into gray. "Could be our team," he murmured. "Could be nothing." Still hope flickered. Ben uncoiled the handheld mirror and aimed it toward the vent, catching stray light and reflecting it outward. Emma retrieved the small LED beacon they had tied to a sapling, its batteries low but still functional, and waved it in steady arcs through the slit. Marcus followed with a makeshift semaphore. 2 ice axes crossed, then separated a simple V for victory, X for distress. Inside, the survivors worked in swift, synchronized motions. Sophia bound fresh strips of colored tape to a vine pole they had found outside, fashioning a signal staff. Marcus carried it to the opening and thrust it upright in a snowbank where its fluttering banners caught the wind. The Quingy's interior brightened with the glow of shared purpose. No one spoke. There was no time for words. Outside, twilight deepened to indigo, and the air settled into icy stillness, broken only by their collective breath. Emma fetched the emergency radio, a battered device with a single channel set to rescue frequencies, and flipped its switch. Static hissed, then a crackle. "This is Summit Eagle, over." The voice was distant, garbled by interference. Raj's ears burned again, a glimmer of connection. He fumbled for the radio's microphone, fingers stiff with cold. "This is Alpine 6 position grid, Alpha Charlie 7. We are alive." "Repeat, we are alive," he replied. Silence. Then the radio snapped. Alpha 7 acknowledged. "Rescue chopper ETA 12 hours. Hold position. Over." Relief washed over them like warm water. Raj sagged against the snow wall, closing his eyes as warmth bloomed in his chest. "They know," he whispered. "We're saved." Yet rescue was not yet assured. The storm had left ice-laden air heavy and freezing, and the terrain remained treacherous. Raj handed the radio to Sophia and spread out their mapped route on a scrap of tarp. 12 hours, he said. "That's half a day. We need to clear a landing zone and prepare for departure." They exchanged determined glances. The Quingy had been their haven, but now it was time to emerge. Emma led the way, stepping out into the dim glow. The cold struck her like a fist, but her heart burned brighter. She set to digging a shallow platform carved into the packed snowfield, large enough for a helicopter skid to touch down. Marcus loosened blocks of compacted ice with his hands and dragged them aside, revealing the firm ground beneath. Ben and Sophia followed, carving a windbreak, a semicircle of snow walls built 3 feet high, intended to shield approaching choppers from sudden gusts. Each block they placed carried memories of collapse and triumph. Each wall rose as a testament to their survival. Meanwhile, Raj marked the platform's perimeter with colored tape and emergency blankets, creating a vivid target that would contrast against the white expanse. Night deepened and stars pricked the sky like distant lanterns. The platform took shape, a flat 15-foot wide circle ringed by 3-foot walls. A cross of bunting, tattered strips of tarp spanned its center, its dark fabric swaying in the wind. At its edge, the signal staff stood sentinel, the colored tape fluttering like a lighthouse beacon. Inside the quingy, they prepared for the final watch. The stove's last fuel cell hissed to life, melting small amounts of snow into water to fill 3 slender bottles. 3 received water now. The other 3 would have to wait until morning. Marcus distributed them evenly, emphasizing moderation. "We drink only half now," he advised. "Half later." They ate sparingly, a single square of jerky split among them. Its leathery savor was bittersweet, a reminder of scarcity, yet proof of victory. Sophia tucked the remaining emergency chocolate bar beneath her fleece, promising herself a taste only if the chopper blades roared above. By 2:00 a.m., the landing platform was finished. Raj checked his watch. 10 hours remained. Sophia affixed glow sticks along the platform's rim, tapping them until each cracked and cast sickly green light. Emma buried extra food near the entrance, a hidden cache for unexpected delays. Marcus rewound the safety line and packed it neatly. Ben dismantled the semaphore contraption, preserving colored tape for future signals. They re-entered the quingy one by one, faces illuminated by headlamp halos. The cavern was warmer now, as if infused with hope rather than huddled fear. Raj set the radio on a flat stone and tuned it, listening to the static hum of rescue chatter. Emma crawled to the center, placing her hand on the cold floor. "We did it," she said softly, voice thick. "We're here tomorrow." Sophia joined her shoulders, brushing. 6 days, she murmured. "We fought 6 days." Marcus knelt by the stove. "One more night," he said. "Then we leave." They lay in their bivvies, bodies pressed close. Outside, the wind had stilled. Inside, a quiet settled, punctuated only by the slow drip of melting icicles above. Each mind drifted, conjuring images of home, of warm beds and hearty meals, of friends and family waiting. Each heart beat in time, with the promise of rescue, yet remained wary. Survival had taught them caution. Hours passed in silent vigil. Sophia checked the vent slit periodically, her breath fogging the view. Marcus monitored the radio light, waiting for any change. Emma traced patterns in the snow ceiling, each frost petal unique yet fleeting. Ben covered the glow sticks with snow mounds to diffuse light, balancing visibility with camouflage against stray flares. Raj remained alert, senses honed to every creak and whisper of the quingy. At dawn's edge, the sky shifted from indigo to slate gray. Raj stirred. 2 hours, he announced, and the group stirred with him. They shared glances bright with fatigue and elation. Their sanctuary had carried them through whiteouts, hunger-shattered hopes, and blinding storms. Now it would share them with salvation. Raj whispered a final instruction: stand by the entrance. Be ready for rotor wash. They formed a human chain, Emma at the front, ready to peel back the snow-block door. Sophia behind her, the radio in hand. Marcus and Ben flanking the stove shelf, prepared to anchor equipment. Raj and Sophia's partner, Sophia, and Marcus's partner, Sophia and Alex, no. The group blurred in memory, but they held position. Above the sky lightened, and in the breaking dawn the distant thump began a steady beating like a giant bird's wings. Hearts pounded to match the rhythm. They exhaled as one, bracing against the quake of rotor wash that would soon sweep through their snow fortress. In that moment, the solitary beacon felt less lonely. It had guided them through darkness, through doubt, through every frozen hour. And now, in the hush before rescue, it pulsed with the truth. They had lived to see they were not alone. The river's roar reached the survivors before they saw it, a deep hollow of thunder that grew louder with every step. Beyond the flat snowfield lay a tangled ribbon of water, half frozen and choked with jagged ice floes. Marcus knelt at the edge, testing the brittle ice with the shaft of his ice axe. Each strike sent a sharp echo down the riverbank, revealing cracks that spidered outward. Emma stood beside him, breath caught in her throat. "It's our only route," she said softly. "The map shows no other way to the summit." The sky had cleared to a brittle blue, and sunlight sparkled on the ice, turning the river into a shifting mosaic of silver and sapphire. Yet beauty held deadly promise. A misstep, and the river would claim them, dragging frozen bodies downstream into deeper currents. Raj surveyed the scene from a few paces back, calculating angles of entry and exit. He pointed to a narrow gap between two ice floes where the current seemed gentler. "That's our crossing point," he decided. "Ben, you'll lead with the rope, one at a time." Ben nodded, securing a length of climbing rope around his waist and anchoring the other end to a sturdy boulder behind him. It ran through Marcus's hands like a lifeline. The rest of the group gathered in a tight huddle on the bank. Sophia produced an emergency bivvy and tore it into strips, fashioning a makeshift harness she clipped to her own belt. Emma took a deep breath, tasting the cold air. Beneath her layers, her heart hammered. Every instinct screamed to stay within the Quingy's shelter, but rescue depended on this perilous passage. Marcus stepped onto the nearest floe crampons, biting into ice as he edged forward. He moved deliberately, every shift of weight measured. Emma whispered a silent prayer for him. Raj gripped the rope's end, eyes locked on Marcus's squat silhouette. The floe rocked under Marcus's heel, then settled as he positioned his axe firmly into a crack for balance. He slid a boot onto the next slab, then another closer to midstream. Below the ice, the water gushed, a living thing, eager to reclaim its domain. Halfway across the floe, Marcus stood on split beneath him with a sickening crack. Emma gasped as ice shards tumbled into the river. Marcus lurched, but caught himself one axe, lodged deep. The rope snapped taut. Raj braced his feet, pulling back with all his might. Marcus's boot skidded. Water seeped into a small gap beneath the ice. Sophia's shriek cut through the roar, but Marcus found his center, digging crampon points into the slab. Slowly, agonizingly, he hauled himself back toward the bank, guided by Raj's steady pull. When he reached solid ground, Marcus collapsed face down, exhaling the breath he'd held since he stepped onto the river. Raj knelt beside him, untangling the rope. "That was close," he murmured, voice thick with relief. Marcus coughed snow-laced water sputtering from his lips. "Too close," he rasped. "But I made it." Emma knelt across from him, pressing a mitten to his chest, feeling the frantic drum of his heart. With Marcus safe, it was Ben's turn. He slung the rope over his shoulder and entered the gap. The ice here was thinner, the current stronger. Each step felt like walking on trembling glass. Midway, a sudden swell lifted an ice floe, crashing it against its neighbor. Ben shuddered at the jolt grip tightening on his axe. Yet he pressed forward each step, a testament to resolve. When he reached the far side, Sophia released a breath so long it rattled. She clipped the rope to a stout cairn of stones, creating a fixed line for Emma and Sophia to follow. Emma approached next to heart thudding in her ears. She tied her harness to the rope and stepped into the frigid channel. Ice shards scraped her shins, and cold water lapped at her waist. The current tugged at her a silent predator. She felt herself tilt, panic rising. Raj's voice reached her through the wind. "Breathe. Take one step at a time." She inhaled axes angled for balance and pushed forward. The river roared, but her focus narrowed to rope ice, foothold. She reached the second floe, chest-high water swirling below. Emma swung one boot forward, then the next, until at last she felt solid ground beneath her. Relief and triumph mingled on her cheeks as she scrambled up the bank. Sophia watched from shore arms folded against her chest. She checked her harness and approached the rope, stepping carefully. The water swirled around her knees. She counted each step, echoing Emma's progress in her mind. Behind her, the Quingy stood like a silent sentinel, its snow walls glinting in the morning sun. A single slip here would mean being swept under, lost. She thought of the makeshift sanctuary they'd built of faces around the stove of shared laughter and tears. She refused to betray that trust. Her foot broke through a thin patch of ice. Water surged above her calf. Sophia bit back a cry and yanked herself onto the next floe. It rocked beneath her, but she steadied herself, axing a small indentation for her foot. Then she lunged upward, pulling against the harness. On the bank, Marcus and Ben reached for her hands, hauling her to safety. She knelt, trembling, water dripping from her pant legs. Emma handed her a scrap of fleece. Sophia wiped her face, letting gratitude wash over her. With all six across Raj, cut the rope and stowed it in his pack. They huddled in a tight group, letting smiles break through the exhaustion. Their boots squished water seeping in. Their clothes clung damp and heavy. Yet in those soaked layers lay proof of triumph over the river's might. Raj threw an arm around the group's shoulders. "One crossing down one mind conquered," he declared softly. They paused to gather strength, sipping water and passing out energy bars, each person receiving a half bar to stave off muscle tremors. Marcus checked his side for bruises. Sophia examined her legs for frostbite. Emma surveyed the scene. The river stretched ahead, calmer now, but no less lethal. The far bank offered a narrow ledge that rose toward the mountain's spine, a path carved by meltwater streams. Their summit lay beyond, just within reach, yet this crossing had tested their limits. As they turned from the river, The sun dipped low, painting the ice floes in fiery orange. Shadows stretched across the snow, lengthening with solemn promise. The crossing had stripped them bare, exposed their vulnerabilities to the rushing water's cruel gaze. But it had also revealed their resolve. They could rely on each other's strength, each rope tether, each breath, in defiance of the current. Raj led them onto the ledge footprints, crisp in the softening snow. They moved with renewed purpose, awareness, heightened by the river's lessons. Each step carried the weight of the crossing, respect for danger, gratitude for survival, and unshakable belief in the bond that held them together. Behind them, the ice-choked ribbon gleamed in the twilight, a boundary they had dared and subdued, and a reminder that beyond every peril, waiting terror could be faced and overcome. Night fell without ceremony, plunging the survivors into a black so deep it felt as though the world beyond the Quingy had ceased to exist. They emerged onto the ledge limbs, stiff and faces pale from the river crossing. The summit lay tantalizingly close, a dark silhouette against a star-faded sky, yet each knew that tonight they would not climb. Instead, they would make camp on a narrow shelf carved by meltwater, half sheltered by a rock overhang. Emma gathered fallen branches and spruce boughs, fashioning a low windbreak to shield them from the mountain's nocturnal breath. Marcus arranged rocks in a semicircle to anchor the remaining tarp, jury-rigged as a lean-to. Sophia fell back, studying the shadows beyond their fire's faint glow, senses sharpened by every trial they'd faced. Across the starlit valley, a pack of wolves began to slink into view, ghostly shapes slinking on padded paws, eyes glinting with curiosity and hunger. Raj stiffened. He motioned for silence, and the group pressed against the rock wall, breath held. The wolves padded closer, 5 in number, their coats matted from ice and brambles. They moved in a V formation, leading with a gray alpha whose eyes burned like embers. The survivors' makeshift camp was an intrusion in the predator's domain, a fragile beacon of warmth and scent. Ben fumbled for driftwood, and lighting the small portable lantern, he held it aloft. Its yellow beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the wolves in ghostly relief. The alpha halted, pinned by the light ears pricked forward. The rest of the pack froze, bodies coiled like springs. In that stillness, time stretched infinitely. Emma murmured, "Stay calm, don't run." Her voice was a hushed lifeline. Running would trigger chase instincts. Raj produced 2 flare cartridges, handing one to Marcus. On my signal, he whispered, 3, 2, now. He struck the flare, hurling it against the rock face, where it exploded into a cascade of red sparks. The wolves snarled, retreating a step backs, arched. The second flare followed Marcus's throw, exploding lower, closer to the overhangs. A roar of color filled the night, threatening to ignite the rock. The wolves recoiled, teeth bared, then melted away into the darkness, bodies vanishing as quickly as they'd appeared. Emma exhaled, releasing tension she hadn't known she'd been holding. Yet her heart hammered a reminder that nature's predators respected only the boldest warnings. They settled by a thin fire Marcus coaxed to life with a few kernels of burnt wood and snowmelt water. Flames licked at branches, painting their faces in orange flicker. The ledge offered little wood. Each spark was precious. Sophia dipped her cup into the dwindling water bottle, distributing 2 sips to each person. The cold pressed in from all sides, but the wolves' warning flares and the fire's pale glow drew a boundary between life and death. Raindrops spattered against the tarp, an unexpected shift. High-altitude rain mixed with snow, creating a fine glaze that clung to fabric and stone. The tarp groaned under its weight. Emma adjusted the lean-to, ensuring runoff would fall beyond their sleeping area. Marcus cleared pooled water with gloved hands, shaking tarps to dislodge beads of ice. Ben and Sophia reinforced the windbreak, stacking rock and branch. Inside their circle, they shared moments of quiet reflection. Sophia whispered a memory of her childhood dog howling at the moon, a gentle echo of the wolves' call. Ben recounted a night sky from his home village, where constellations ruled the heavens without threat of ice or ravenous eyes. Emma recited a verse of poetry about endurance. Each memory was a talisman, anchoring them to a world beyond hardship. Their final task was to rest. Raj offered a quick tourniquet of heated stones, rare warmth, in a cloth pouch to press against frost-nipped fingers. Emma coated her scarf with a thin smear of chocolate from the emergency bar, both as a balm and as comfort. They tucked themselves beneath the tarp bivvies, overlapping, forming a human shield against wind, rain, and predatory night. Sleep came fitfully. Emma dreamed of gales and collapsing roofs. Ben saw wolves' eyes in the dark. Marcus felt the river's current pulling at his ankles. Sophia heard the summit wind stirring above. Raj woke at every crack of stone or sigh of fabric hands ready to strike another flare. At dawn's first hint, an ashen tinge to the sky, they stirred. The lean-to sagged under its icy glaze, but they emerged intact. No wolves returned. The mountain had accepted their terms of safe passage. They packed swiftly, retrieving flares and lantern, extinguishing the fire and scattering its ashes. The ledge, now slick with ice, demanded caution as they prepared for the final ascent. Shoulders squared, they faced the slope. Behind them lay the river, the Quingy, the flare-lit arena with wolves. Ahead lay the summit and rescue. Emma inhaled the cold air, deeply tasting freedom's edge. The bonds forged through nights of hunger storms, and wolves circled tight around their hearts. When one faltered, another would stand firm. Together they clipped harnesses to rope and began the steep climb, each step upward, a testament to survival's cost and promise. The wolves receded under the ledge ghosts of a perilous night as the survivors carried forward, undaunted, unwavering, alive. The climb resumed under a pallid sky washed in cold blue light. Each footfall crunched against the crusted snow that draped the mountain like an ancient shroud. Emma paused, her gaze drifting to the slope she'd traversed. In that moment, the present dissolved, and she was 16 again, stranded on a rainy highway, broken down car, shivering beside her uncertainty, pressing like the future she couldn't yet face. The memory buzzed through her mind, the smell of damp asphalt, the beat of her own heart, so loud it drowned the world. A sudden gust yanked her back to reality. She clenched the rope tether and pressed forward, fingertips numbed to the ice that encrusted her gloves. Behind her, Marcus steadied himself, and Raj's measured footsteps marked the path. But in her mind, she trod that highway shoulder alone until a passing truck's headlights illuminated her fear and a stranger's voice offered help. She'd refused pride winning over panic and later regretted the solitude she'd chosen. Sophia noticed Emma's hesitation and fell into step beside her. "Lean on me," she offered softly, voice a warm current in the freezing air. Emma tucked her arm under Sophia's gratitude, flooding her chest. The memory fractured, then the stranger's kindness echoing in each supportive step now. Further up, Ben's breath caught as he stared at a rock fissure. His mind slipped back to the laboratory where he'd watched a colleague suffer from frostbite on an Arctic expedition research team. He'd been too cautious, then hesitated to act and lost that friend's toe to amputation. The guilt lingered like an ice crystal in his heart. Now, on this mountain, he refused to hesitate again. He squared his shoulders and pushed upward each step, a quiet vow against past inaction. Marcus's mind wandered to his childhood home, a flood-ravaged riverbank where he'd clung to a broken tree trunk as water surged around him. The roar of this mountain river that he'd crossed earlier fractured his breath, and he relived the terror of nearly drowning, heart-pounding lungs screaming beneath cold currents. But this time, he was the rescuer steadying Sophia when she slipped, pulling Ben from the ice. He exhaled determination, solidifying his resolve. Raj let his face set in stoic lines, but his thoughts were haunted too. He recalled the avalanche that had claimed his mentor on his first expedition, how he'd watched helplessly as the snow swallowed laughter and life in a blinding roar. His mentor's final words, "adapt or be undone," echoed in Raj's ears. He adjusted his grip on the rope and recalled those words as both warning and promise. The slope steepened and the wind sharpened to a blade's edge. Each survivor trudged forward, buttressed by the group's silent support. Emma's memories melted into resolve. Ben's guilt transmuted to action. Marcus's fear recast as vigilance. Raj's grief honed into leadership. Sophia's own memories remained unspoken, but present, a soft anchor amid frigid chaos. Above them, the summit's broken ridge loomed a jagged promise against the sky. Each flashback had threatened to snap their will, but here in the crucible of frozen trials, they forged themselves anew. Every haunting memory became a lesson, every regret a lodestar guiding their steps. They neared the ridge crest where rescue would meet them. Emma heard her past's echo fade into the wind's roar. Ben felt guilt's weight lighten. Marcus's heart steadied. Raj's mentor's words transformed into triumph. Sophia's silent anchor held firm. Together they crested the summit, at last 6 souls reborn through memory and ice. The world unfurled below River Quingy, Ledge Wolves' domain, all conquered chapters in their 6-day saga. For in survival, they had not only endured the elements, but reconciled the echoes that once held them captive. A distant rumble rolled across the mountain like the growl of an ancient titan awakening. The survivors froze torsos, rigid eyes darting toward the source. Raj's jaw clenched as he recognized the sound, a slab of snow detaching high above hurtling earthward in a thunderous cascade. Avalanche, he hissed, voice sharp as ice. They dropped their packs and scrambled for the nearest rock overhang. Emma dove behind a boulder, limbs taut with tension. Sophia pressed against the cavern wall, heart pounding in her ears. Marcus lunged upward, wedging himself in a crevice between two granite slabs. Ben threw himself flat, eyes squeezed shut as the world shuddered. The first wave hit with bone-jarring force. A wall of snow and ice slammed into their camp, crushing benches and supplies, burying the platform they had cleared for rescue. The sleet-laden air filled with shrieks of shifting snow and the brittle crack of splintering wood. The overhang above rattled as if on the brink of collapse. Raj yanked Emma to her feet. "Move deeper," he bellowed. They darted toward the Quingy's cave entrance, only to find the avalanche's tail had buried it in 2 feet of fresh snow. Marcus, already dug in, pounded the mound with his ice axe, shoveling flakes aside to widen a gap. Sophia and Ben joined, their breaths ragged from exertion and fear. Emma shoved branches into the crumbling snow wall, propping it to prevent collapse. Inside the newly exposed cavern, the air crackled with static chill. Snow dust settled like gray ash over everything. Their lantern flickered, casting trembling shadows on ice-lashed walls. Raj scanned the roof for fractures. None appeared, but every snowflake overhead loomed like a threat. "We need to clear the entrance fully," he said. But quietly, no more tremors. They worked in a tight circle, shoveling snow into piles away from the entry. Boots scraped against rock axes rang dull echoes, and breath condensed into icy clouds. Marcus carved a temporary door, interlocking snow blocks reinforced with broken branches. Sophia strapped her headlamp to the wall, illuminating their progress with a pale beam. Within 30 minutes, they had reopened a narrow portal. Outside, the mountain lay transformed. The avalanche had scoured the ridge, exposing bare ice and shattered boulders. Their signal platform was gone, buried beneath a drifty white grave. The wind whispered through the new drifts, as if lamenting the landscape's scars. They gathered at the mouth of their cave, surveying the devastation. "We'll have to clear a new landing zone," Raj said, voice tight, "and dig out the original platform once it's safe." He traced the ridgeline eyes, squinting against the glare. "But first, we must recover supplies." He led them deep into the storm's aftermath. Their caches lay half-buried, the rope spare fuel canister, an emergency radio buried deep. They dug systematically, axes chipping through crusted drifts. Emma unearthed the radio and checked its battery. It crackled once before going silent. Snow had iced the contacts. She blew into the microphone, expelling moisture, then tapped it sharply. Static hissed back. "Radio's alive," she reported, relief softening her voice. Ben found the rope's coils still taped, but frosted stiff. He yanked it free, letting it unspool across the floor. Sophia located the fuel canister, its nozzle frozen shut. She warmed it between her palms until liquid dribbled from the valve. Marcus retrieved their ration packs, flattened but intact. Emma pocketed a few morsels, mindful of the hours ahead. They returned to the ridge. Raj surveyed the scene again. "We clear southwest of here," he directed, pointing to a shallow plateau sunlit even through cloud cover. There's less debris there, about 20 feet by 20 feet, leveled enough for rotors. He and Ben began shoveling cutting blocks and hauling them downslope. Sophia and Marcus reinforced the perimeter with boulders and branches. Emma placed emergency blankets on the snow to reflect any residual heat-melting crusts and making the surface more conspicuous. An avalanche aftershock ripped through the slope, lesser but still jarring. The team paused, chests heaving, and pressed against the ground as smaller drifts tumbled overhead. Stillness returned, leaving powder drifting like ash from a dying fire. They resumed work, determination etched on their frozen faces. As they shoveled, each recalled the avalanche's lore, how a single misstep loosen a cornice, trigger a slab could send a killer wave cascading at 70 miles an hour. They took extra care at the edges, probing relentlessly with their axes before heaving blocks for safety. Sweat pooled beneath layers, steaming when it hit the air. Hours passed, each shovelful a small victory against nature's fury. Finally, the clearing emerged a smooth square of pale snow, its edges defined by dark stones and flapping tarp strips. Raj nodded in satisfaction. "That will do," he announced. "Now we wait." They collapsed in a circle around the platform, bodies trembling from exertion and adrenaline. Marcus retrieved the radio, calling out, "Summit Eagle, this is Alpine 6. Avalanche swept our original landing zone. We've cleared a new site grid, Alpha Charlie 8. Repeat, Alpha Charlie 8. Over." The radio crackled, then responded, "Roger. Confirm coordinates. Will update flight path. Stand by for ETA revision. Over." Relief and fatigue rolled through the group like waves. Emma sank onto her pack toes, numb inside her boots. Sophia leaned back against a rock, sipping melted snow from her insulated bottle. Ben lay flat on his back, watching flurries dance against the sky. Marcus leaned on his axe, scanning the horizon for telltale rotor wash. Raj gathered them close. 6 days. 6 trials, he said quietly. We've felled storms, whiteouts, hunger wolves, rivers, and now avalanches. We earn this rest. He tapped each shoulder, mouthing thank you to each teammate. Tonight we sleep near the platform. Tomorrow we are gone. As twilight fell, they erected a small shelter of tarps and branches atop the cleared square. Inside the windbreak, held firm against rising gusts. They shared a last communal meal, a thin broth of forage roots mixed with slivers of jerky. The flavor was a memory of every hardship endured, every small triumph won. They savored it as both sustenance and ceremony. By nightfall, they lay in the lean-to bivvies touching. The plateau was silent, save for the creak of settling snow. Above, a fragile moon peeked from behind cloud fringes, illuminating their temporary haven. Emma drifted into a fitful sleep, thoughts still echoing with the avalanche's roar. In their dreams, they stood at the mountain's crest, gazing down at the world they had conquered. The wind roared one last time, not as a threat, but as a salute, a thunderous applause for those who faced its fury and remained standing. Dawn's pale light revealed a subtle shift in the landscape. Beyond a gentle rise lay what seemed to be a dark band of trees, their silhouettes crisp against the snow. The survivors paused on the slope, eyes narrowing. The tree line promised shelter, warmth, and a path out of this white desert, yet something in its perfection felt too precise, too deliberate. Emma swallowed, chest tightening. "That can't be real," she whispered, but her feet moved forward anyway. Raj led the approach, crampons chinking on ice. The promise of pines of shadows and needles underfoot fueled every step. Sophia followed, heart fluttering with anticipation. Ben and Marcus flanked them, scanning the horizon. At first, the forest edge held tall trunks, loomed branches, drooping with snow. A thin path wove between them, inviting. They set foot on firm ground, the crunch of pine needles beneath snow a balm to their frayed nerves. As they pressed deeper, the illusion unraveled. The trunks grew impossibly smooth and glassy, their bark shimmering with frost rather than texture. Branches arched overhead in perfect symmetry, as though sculpted by an unseen hand. Light filtered through in steady rays, but the air remained frigid, and still no bird song, no rustle of wildlife. Emma reached out to brush a limb. Her glove met only brittle ice. When she pulled back, the branch remained forever straight, unbent by her touch. Ben's breath hung in the air, crystallizing instantly. He swung his head, searching for the forest's living edges. "Nothing moved. It's a mirage," he muttered. "A heat inversion trick." His words struck Marcus like cold water. They had glimpsed water pools promising liquid life, only to find frozen ice. Now this phantasmal wood tested their resolve. Emma squared her shoulders. "We know illusions," she said softly. "The world here toys with hope. Let's not fall for it." Yet, with every step back toward the open slope, the trees shifted, growing thicker, blocking the return path. They were trapped in a labyrinth of spectral pines. Panic flickered in Sophia's eyes. "We can't go back," she choked. "It only deepens." Desperation spurred Raj's calm. He planted his ice axe vertically, tracing the echoing lines on the shimmering bark. "Follow me," he ordered. One by one, they stepped onto safe footing, hard-packed snow between the trunks, avoiding the deceptive patches of soft crystalline drift where collapse would swallow them. Marcus set tape markers on branches that held real snow, while Emma tested each step with her probe, ensuring genuine ground beneath. The forest illusion closed around them, light dimming as branch after branch formed an unbroken canopy. Their breaths grew shallow, misting in the chilling stillness. Sophia's voice trembled. "We were fools," she said, "falling for a dream." Emma placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "No," she replied, "we learn. Let's wake ourselves." At Raj's signal, they halted. He raised his voice, pitched low and firm, reciting a count in unison. 1, 2, 3. Then each shouted their name, the sound ricocheting off the frozen trunks. Their voices shattered the illusion, fracturing the mirrored bark. Branches cracked shards of ice, rattling down like sleet. Light fractured into slivers, revealing the truth. The forest had been carved from compacted ice and snow, a trick of shadow and perspective, designed by the sun's angle on the mountain's flank. Emma seized her ice axe and struck at a shimmering trunk. The surface shattered, revealing powdery drift behind it. Marcus and Ben joined, hacking at the ice walls, until soil and rock peeked through. Sophia scraped away, pressing her palm to rough granite. Raj called climb up, and together they clambered a small outcrop that had been hidden behind the mirage. Emerging onto the open slope once more, they paused to steady their racing hearts. The forest flickered out behind them, replaced by the endless white they knew so well. Emma exhaled tension, draining. "No more shortcuts," she said, voice soft. "The mountain demands reality." They collected their markers, the strips of tape fluttering in the thin wind as reminders of the illusion. Ben rolled them into his pocket with a rueful shake of his head. Sophia touched the rough rock of the outcrop, grounding herself in its solidity. Marcus scooped a handful of actual snow for water, reminding them of tangible needs. Raj checked the compass, then his watch. 4 hours of daylight left, he calculated. We keep moving, no detours. He began the ascent again, each step, deliberate eyes wary for further mirages. They climbed in silence, lessons heavy on their minds, that hope can blind, that beauty can deceive, and that the only path forward lay in clear-eyed perseverance. As evening's glow touched the ridgeline, they glimpsed the rescue chopper's searchlight far below a true beacon cutting through dusk. Emma's spirits lifted. The mirage had tested them. Reality would now guide them home. Together they pressed onward, leaving the phantom forest behind, and trusting only what they could touch, hear, and breathe. Before dawn's first breath, a dull roar echoed up the canyon, the distant chop of rotors slicing through cold air. The chopper's searchlight swept across the slope below, illuminating ice crystals in its beam like a field of scattered diamonds. Emma's heart surged, but Raj held up a gloved hand. "Wait for the pilot's signal," he whispered, voice taut with focus. The survivors scrambled down the final 200 feet of incline, guided by the landing platform they'd cleared. Each step was cautious. Steep ice patches lurked beneath brittle snow, ready to betray an unsuspecting foot. Marcus led probing with his ice axe, while Sophia followed with the semaphore flags, their colored tape catching the light. Ben and Emma trailed harnesses clipped to Raj's anchor line, ensuring none slipped beyond recovery. At the platform's edge, frost-rimmed boulders framed the clearing. The chopper's beam danced across the white square. The walls of snow and stone they'd built now served as runway lights. Emma adjusted the last glow stick, its green glow a muted beacon under the searchlight's brilliance. Raj checked his radio. The pilot's voice crackled clear and urgent. "Visual on your signal. Stand by for approach." Ben exhaled, breath steaming. Sophia pressed her shoulder into Emma's arm, both trembling with relief. Marcus tightened his harness straps. Raj turned to the group. "On my mark, we move to the windward side and keep low." He scanned each face, meeting their eyes. "We've trained for this. Trust each other." A gust swept across the platform as the chopper descended into view, its dark silhouette carving a corridor of noise through the night. The rotor's wash blasted snow into swirling vortices that hammered their bodies. Emma crouched head down, arms shielding her face. Sophia pressed her back against the windbreak, eyes closed against stinging flakes. Marcus braced, footing firm, thanks to his crampons. The helicopter settled with a thud energy that vibrated through the snow. Raj barked, "Move." They rose, gripping their gear, and sprinted toward the chopper's open side door. The wind threatened to push them back, but they pressed on 6 determined shapes, forging forward through the blast. Inside the cabin's roar was deafening. The pilot shouted instructions over the intercom. "Clip in, fasten yourselves." "Let's go," Raj and Marcus clipped their harnesses to the tether line dangling from the ceiling. Ben and Sophia secured the stretcher seats. Emma helped Sophia into position, then pitched herself forward, helmet almost rattling as she latched into the last ring. The door slammed shut and the chopper lifted. Snowstorms churned below, then fell away as they rose. The survivors pressed faces to the frosted windows, watching the slope and the Quingy, the river, the mirage forest shrink into memory. The mountain receded into swirling white, and at last the world below was hidden. Inside, adrenaline ebbed, replaced by exhaustion that pooled in their bones. Raj peered at each teammate, lips curving into a weary smile. "We made it," he announced over the intercom. The pilot overhead gave a thumbs up through his visor. Emma closed her eyes, listening to the engine's pulse, feeling warmth seep through her layers. Sophia exhaled tears onto her goggles. Ben rubbed his frozen hands together, marveling at the cabin's heat. Marcus tapped Raj's shoulder, silent gratitude. As they ascended above the clouds, the glow of dawn tinted the horizon in pale gold. Their 6-day odyssey, born of frost and fear and indomitable will, had reached its finale. The mountain's peak, once a distant silhouette, now lay beneath them conquered. The roar of rotors faded to a distant hum as the helicopter banked toward the nearest medical outpost, perched on a rocky ledge 3 miles below. Through the frost-crusted cabin windows, the survivors watched the mountain recede, a towering monument, stripped of its power, now merely a silent witness to their ordeal. Raj leaned forward, voice soft yet steady. "Medical team is ready on the ledge," he announced. "Stay clipped in until they reach us." Below, an emergency response team, assembled under searchlights, their figures small against the vast snowfield. 2 medics in insulated suits waited by a rugged side door, tethered to the chopper by bright rescue lines. Sophia's breath fogged the pain as she traced their movements with her eyes, each gesture measured and calm. Marcus squeezed her gloved hand in solidarity. The helicopter touched down on the unmarked plateau, a mechanical bird alighting on a frozen sea. The skids kicked up drifts of powder that danced around the cabin in miniature snowstorms. Inside, the survivors kept low until the pilot's command. Then Raj called out, "Move to the door," and one by one they slid toward the opening harnesses, guiding them safely through the wind blast. The door flap dropped, revealing the rescue team, 2 medics and a commanding officer, faces obscured by goggles and hoods. The lead medic extended a hand through the blowing snow. "Welcome," he said over the roar. "We've got warm blankets and hot packs. Let's get you stabilized." Emma was first. She stepped onto the skid plate, crunching fresh snow under her crampons. A medic wrapped a heated blanket around her shoulders, its warm vapor seeping through her layers. A second medic applied chemical hand warmers to her gloves, then checked her pulse and oxygen levels, with a small device clipped to her fingertips. "Pulse is strong," the medic reported. "But you're hypothermic. Let's get you into the heated cabin." Behind Emma, Ben, and Marcus exited next. The medics worked in tandem, guiding them into the cabin, where the heater vented hot air like a welcoming breath. Sophia and Raj followed the last to exit. Sophia stumbled slightly, her legs weak from hours of standing and adrenaline come down. A medic caught her arm, steadying her, then pressed a warm pack to her abdomen. She closed her eyes, leaning into the heat. Raj paused at the door, scanning the plateau one last time. The landing zone they'd carved now bore the scuffs of skids and boot prints, a tapestry of survival etched in snow. He exhaled a cloud of relief and turned toward the cabin. "Go," he said quietly, and stepped inside. The door sealed and the cabin's heater roared to life. Steam coiled upward as the medics directed the survivors to benches along the walls. 2 rows of stretchers had been installed behind the pilot's rigid frames, ready if any needed immobilization. Emma sank onto a bench, warm air washing over her like a healing tide. A medic checked her oxygen mask, then offered her a sip of warm electrolyte solution. The liquid burned pleasantly in her throat, flushing her veins with life. Ben, sitting beside her, unstrapped his harness and massaged his forearms, knuckles white from gripping ice axes. A medic applied warming gel to his hands, fingers and forearms kneading away stiffness. "Your core temperature's rising," the medic noted. "Keep it up, and you'll be back to full strength in a few hours." Marcus and Sophia huddled under one blanket, sharing body heat. The commanding officer approached them, clipboard in hand. He asked their names, followed by brief medical questions, any injuries, allergies, past conditions. Marcus answered steadily. Sophia nodded through shivers. The officer recorded details, then handed them warm fruit bars and bottled water. "Eat small amounts," he advised. "It helps stabilize your blood sugar." Raj sat across from them, boots propped on a storage case. He removed his goggles, revealing tired eyes that still glinted with resilience. The medic checked his vitals, then tapped his chest gently. "You're cleared to stand once we land." "Any pain?" Raj shook his head. "Just gratitude." The chopper banked smoothly, gliding down the canyon toward the outpost. Through the cabin windows, jagged cliffs and frozen waterfalls flickered past. The survivors traced every landmark, a crevasse they'd probed the phantom forest, they'd dispelled the avalanche-scarred ridge they'd reclaimed. Each ribbon of rock and snow carried ghosts of their journey. Now they watched them shrink in the distance, rematerializing as memories rather than dangers. At the medical outpost, a heated tent awaited its walls, humming with portable heaters and lined with cots. The helicopter settled onto a gravel landing pad, cleared of ice. The medics guided the survivors inside, where nurses in insulated coveralls greeted them with hot towels and more blankets. The tent glowed with warm light, a sanctuary starkly different from the harsh white outside. Emma lay on a cot near a heater, head cradled by a fleece pillow. A nurse cleaned her face of frost and soot, then wrapped her head in a soft cap. "You're going to be fine," the nurse assured her, offering a gentle smile. "Rest here and sip this tea. It'll settle your stomach." Emma took the cup, inhaling the cinnamon and ginger aroma. With each sip, color crept back into her cheeks. Ben reclined on the cot across the aisle, boots discarded in favor of thick socks. A nurse applied a warming mask over his hands, causing beads of sweat to form at his hairline. "Your circulation will normalize soon," she said as she checked his feet for early frostbite. Marcus sat up, testing movement in his shoulders, and found them surprisingly nimble. A volunteer assistant offered him a warm meal, porridge with slivers of dehydrated fruit, and he ate gratefully. Sophia curled beneath a blanket near the tent's edge, head pillowed on a pack. She closed her eyes, letting tears slip free as the tension drained from her limbs. A counselor approached, offering a warm drink and quiet words of reassurance. "You've been through an ordeal," the counselor said. "It's normal to feel overwhelmed. You're safe now." Raj remained standing for a moment, surveying the tent's occupants. Then he sat beside Sophia, placing a hand on her shoulder. "We did it," he said simply. She nodded, voice thick. "Thanks to you." Outside, darkness gave way to pre-dawn light. The howling winds echoed faintly beyond the tent walls, reminders of the mountain's power. Inside, the survivors exchanged tired smiles and murmured words, gratitude, relief, and threads of humor that wove them closer. The nurse on Emma's cot mentioned that a transport plane would arrive in 4 hours, carrying them to a full medical facility for further evaluation and warmth that would last beyond a single hot tea. As the first real smiles broke across their faces, each survivor felt a shift. The cold adventure of the past days had imprinted scars and strengths, yet now they could exhale fully. The journey's final chapter, Frozen Rescue, was not just the moment of extraction, but the embrace of compassion and care that followed. Here in the heated tent, their frost-bound bodies thawed not only in temperature, but in spirit, carried by the unwavering promise that survival had earned them more than escape. It had earned them new lives, softened by the knowledge that no one endures alone. Recovery came in measured pulses, the steady beeps of monitors, the soft rustle of blankets, the warm murmur of nurses making their rounds. The survivors inhabited a ward of private rooms, each window overlooking a valley, now thawing into spring runoff. Emma lay in a crisp hospital bed, legs wrapped in compression socks, but free of frostbite's fear. Through the glass door, Marcus sat in a recliner, sipping water from a hospital cup, while Sophia rested on the adjacent cot, reading a note Raj had left an apology for waking her too early and a promise of breakfast when she awoke. The ward felt otherworldly compared to the mountain's brutal indifference. Here, the air hummed with soft lamps, the beds were level and firm, and meals arrived on trays with color and variety. Emma marveled at the sweetness of fresh fruit and the warmth of real soup, each spoonful a revelation. Yet despite the comfort, her mind drifted back to ice-slick slopes and starvation's edge, as if the mountain's lessons still echoed in her bones. A physical therapist entered, a kindly woman in a fleece cardigan who introduced herself as Dr. Nguyen. She guided Emma through gentle stretches, ankle circles, light leg raises each movement, accompanied by a firm but encouraging voice. "You're stronger than you know," Dr. Nguyen said, noting the faint tremor in Emma's quads. These will help rebuild muscle memory. Emma forced a smile, flexing her ankles against elastic resistance bands. With every rotation, she felt tremors of pain and pride. Each echoscape of the mountain's strain receded further, replaced by the ward's calm rhythm. Across the hall, Marcus underwent his own therapy. He stood with a walker's shoulders bundled in a fleece sweater, eyes crinkling in concentration as a nurse guided him through balance exercises. The river crossing had bruised his ribs, and even breathing felt like a negotiation. Yet with each inhale, he recalled pulling partners to safety, and he forced his lungs to expand beyond discomfort. The nurse praised every stable step. Marcus nodded gratitude, mingling with residual adrenaline, until motion itself became a testament to survival. Sophia's recovery was quieter. She lay in bed, hands wrapped around a photo of home, her cat peeking over a windowsill. A counselor sat beside her, tissue in hand. Sophia spoke of fear's grip during the phantom forest, of how wolves' eyes had echoed her own hunger, of the avalanche's roar that still vibrated in her chest. The counselor offered validation, naming her experience and pain, helping her transform tremors into words. Survival is more than physical, the counselor said gently. You carry memories that need tending. Sophia exhaled tears, ebbing away, feeling less alone in her scars. Ben ever practical studied aerial photographs of the mountain on his tablet documents provided by the rescue team. He traced their route, the Quingy, the river crossing point, the phantom forest illusion, the avalanche zone. Each waypoint now crudely marked with colored glyphs, a border of desert and heaven. He annotated the map with notes on snow density and ice shear lines, determined to learn every lesson. When a fellow survivor asked why he revisited the route, Ben replied, "Knowledge prevents mistakes." His tone was calm, but his eyes betrayed both obsession and respect for the mountain. In her own room, Raj paced softly as nurses came and went. He flipped through the expedition log he'd written by hand on scraps of paper, daily entries of temperature, fuel usage, ration counts, and emotional states. He hovered on the final pages where he'd scribed rescue signals sent and arrival at plateau. His finger hovered over the words "alive together." He closed the log, smoothing the pages as if sealing a promise. A doctor entered to discuss next steps, follow-up imaging for potential frostbite complications, a regimen of physical therapy, and the recommendation of a debriefing session with the rescue crew. Raj nodded, absorbing each plan with the precision of a strategist already drafting post-expedition reports in his mind. Together in a communal visit arranged by hospital staff, they gathered one afternoon in the ward's common room, a bright space with armchairs, potted plants, and a view of the valley's new green growth. Emma arrived in a wheelchair, Marcus leaning on his cane, Sophia clutching her photo, Ben with his tablet, and Raj with the expedition log. They greeted each other with warm smiles and quiet laughs, a language forged by shared adversity. A rescue team lieutenant joined them, her uniform crisp and her expression both proud and solemn. She presented each survivor with a certificate of commendation and a patch bearing the rescue team's emblem. "You faced conditions none should endure," she said. "Your resilience and teamwork saved lives." She paused as she pinned the patch to Raj's fleece. "Thank you." The room filled with applause, and each survivor felt the weight of what they'd accomplished. Yet beneath pride lingered the gravity of cost, the nights of terror, the hunger, the physical toll. They each spoke in turn. Emma recounted the frigid awakening and the solidarity born of shared water drops. Marcus described the river's roar and the strength found in mutual trust. Sophia confessed her fear in the phantom forest and the power of voice to shatter illusions. Ben spoke of the engineer's solace in planning and the humility of nature's unpredictable forces. Raj closed with reflections on leadership's fragility, the lessons of adaptation, and the unbreakable bond they'd forged. Their voices wove a tapestry of survival, each thread colored by memory and gratitude. Afterwards, they strolled out onto the hospital's terrace, a wooden deck overlooking thawing streams. Sunlight warmed their faces for the first time without the sting of wind. Emma took a deep breath, savoring the warmth. "It's strange," she mused. Survival felt like subtraction, losing comfort, warmth, certainty. But maybe it also added something perspective, purpose. Marcus nodded, his cane propped nearby. "I never knew how much courage needed forging," he said. "Now I carry it like armor." Sophia closed her eyes, letting sunbeams filter through her lashes. "And compassion," she added, "for ourselves, for others." Ben and Raj stood side by side, the mountain behind them, unseen but ever present. "We'll return," Ben said quietly, "to build safety, not just to conquer peaks." As they watched a family picnic by the stream below, children chasing ducks, laughter drifting up, they felt both distant and connected. The valley was alive with ordinary miracles, the soft breath of water and wind, the simple warmth of sun. They had clawed meaning from frozen desolation. Now they would carry that meaning forward. Later that evening, before lights out, they shared one last communal supper in the ward's dining room. Bowls of steaming stew, fresh bread, and mugs of hot tea. Each plate bore the story of recovery, nourishment for the body, comfort for the soul. They toasted to each other, to survival's cost and its gift. Their smiles were genuine, yet beneath them lay the echo of the mountain's trials and the transformation it wrought. As Emma returned to her room, she paused in the hallway, hand hovering on the doorknob. She thought of the Quingy's icy walls, the river's fierce current, the phantom forest's lies, the avalanche's roar, the wolves' snarls, and the chopper's roar. Each moment had reshaped her, hollowing out fear and filling her with respect for fragility and strength. She stepped inside, closing the door softly. The room felt full of absence and presence, the absence of terror, the presence of memory. She lay on her bed, hands folded on her chest, and exhaled deeply. Outside, the valley's dusk settled in indigo and rose. Emma closed her eyes, letting tears flow for those lost moments of fear and those gained moments of triumph. Tomorrow, she would walk again, stronger and wiser, but for now. In the hush before sleep, she honored the echoes of survival that would resonate within her forever. The summit ridge lay before them at last, a narrow spine of ice and rock slicing through pale dawn. 6 figures moved in single file along its crest, each step measured crampons biting into the hard surface beneath layers of hoarfrost. Below the valley, spread in a quilt of shadow and light, above the sky bled from silver to rose. Emma led Ice Axe planted firmly, breath even. Her boots kicked fine snow that drifted across the path like drifting ash, and with each footfall, she felt the culmination of every trial they had endured. Behind her, Marcus picked cautious steps, scanning for hidden cornices. His ribs ached with each breath, but he kept his gaze on the horizon, the river crossing the wolves. The avalanche all receded into the mosaic of his mind, sharpened by distance and triumph. He recalled Raj's words about fragility and saw them here a misstep now could send them plummeting into the valley, but he trusted their path and their bond. So he placed each foot deliberately following Emma's tracks tethered by rope and resolve. Sophia followed, eyes bright with dawn's glow. Her heart pounded not with fear but with awe. She remembered the phantom forest's cold trickery and now marveled at these heights where each breath felt like both gift and challenge. Her pack bore empty bottles and frayed flags, but her spirit felt whole. When the wind kicked up, she tightened her jacket and let her exhale drift in swirling mists. The path narrowed to a knife edge, but her feet moved with steady confidence, an echo of every ordeal that taught her perseverance. Ben crouched to check his axes when the path ascended steeply. He tested each anchor point, then drove the pick into the ice, forming a ladder of secure holds. His arms strained against gravity, triceps burning, yet he felt a surge of pride. He had measured snow densities, predicted crevasse patterns, and now stood chest high against the world. He climbed each axis swing, a word in a story of survival and skill. When he reached the next ledge, he paused to sweep the ridge with his gaze, capturing the panorama in memory and data, a final entry in his mental map. Next came Raj and Sophia's partner, no longer separate identities, but halves of a whole. Raj maintained the rope tension, adjusting slack for each climber, guiding their pace like a conductor, leading a symphony of breath and movement. He felt the weight of leadership settle light on his shoulders here at the summit's brink. He recalled the avalanche, the collapse of shelters, the hunger. Each catastrophe had refined his instincts, honed his decisions. Now, at the ridge's apex, he felt the full circle of survival anticipation, fear action, and triumph. As the last climber crested the final hump of ice, Emma looked back. 6 silhouettes stood against the pastel sky, linked by rope and triumph. She raised her arm ice axe, tapping once against the ridge, a signal of victory. Below the valley yawned rivers, glinting forests breathing in green promise. Above, clouds drifted like distant ships on an ocean of air. Between sky and earth, they stood as one, survivors, friends, witnesses to nature's fury and grace. They unclipped the rope, folding it with care, each coil a memento of tethered trust. Emma produced the expedition flag, a scrap of nylon bearing their group's emblem, and held it aloft. The wind caught it, unfurling the colors against dawn's backdrop. They placed the flag in a crevasse, securing it with a stone, a testament to the ordeal they had conquered together. A hush fell. No storm, no growl, no hunger, only the soft hiss of wind at the ridge's peak and the shared rhythm of 6 hearts beating in unison. Emma stepped forward, ice axe planted, and gazed outward. Every personal fear, every frozen night, every pang of hunger had led to this moment of clarity and unity. She knew they would carry these memories forever, but here they were, free from desperation, free from doubt. With a final glance at the ascent path, they prepared to descend. Each understood that return demanded vigilance equal to the climb. But as they turned downward, shoulders squared, eyes bright, they carried the summit's gift, the knowledge that even in nature's harshest crucible, human will and solidarity could prevail. 6 souls tempered by frost and trial now carried promise in every step toward home. Heat now softened the mind like morning light dissolving frost. 6 figures moved away from the summit's raw glory, each step down the ridge, cushioned by memories, transformed into quiet confidence. They no longer counted days or rations. Instead, they savored the gentle crunch of thawing snow underfoot and the whispers of ancient ice yielding to warmth. Conversation drifted between them, soft laughter, recalling absurd moments of hunger and fear, tender thanks for steadfast hands and shared resolve. The world below shimmered rivers coursing with renewed vigor, forests reclaimed by sunlight. In this fragile peace, Emma inhaled slowly, letting the warmth seep into every cell. She felt the mountain's echo fade, replaced by the valley's hum of life birdsong drifting from unseen branches, water murmuring over stones, hearth fires glowing in distant cabins. She reached for Sophia's hand, and their glove-clad fingers met in a silent vow to carry forward the lessons of perseverance and compassion born in ice. Marcus and Ben walked side by side, comparing scars, physical and unseen, and finding strength in shared vulnerability. Raj fell into step beside them, gaze gentle pride, unspoken but shining bright. They crossed meadows tinged with green and villages stirring to dawn. Each familiar scent, baking bread, wood smoke, fresh earth, seemed miraculous after days defined by cold and scarcity. They paused at a clear stream, cupping hands to drink water that sparkled like promise. The chill still lingered, but it no longer frightened them. It had become a companion, a reminder of the distance traveled within and without. By midday, the road home stretched before them, winding through fields bursting with life. They carried no flags now, no tattered bivvies, but in their pockets lay small tokens, a strip of tape, a bit of rope, the expedition log. More precious than any gear were the stories etched into their hearts. Together, they would tell them around warm fires in classrooms to anyone who needed proof that hope endures. And as the sun climbed high, they walked on unburdened by the mountain's trials, uplifted by the knowledge that human bonds like rivers and forests always find a way through the coldest winters.